This is Shoula, Romano, Horing, and I'm here at the Western Wall Plaza with the Western Wall behind me. The Western Wall, in Hebrew Ha-Kotel Ha-Maʿaravi, is in the old city of Jerusalem, a place of prayer and pilgrimage second only to the Jewish people. It was the one wall of 4 walls built by King Herod surrounding the Temple Mount 2,000 years ago, where 2 Jewish temples were located for over 1,000 years. After the destruction of the Second Temple by the Roman in 70 after the Common Era, the Western Wall became uniquely holy to ancient Jews because it was the one wall remaining from around the Second Temple and the closest to the Holy of Hollies. The Temple Mount, which also in Hebrew called Har-Bait, is recognized by all biblical archaeologists as the area of Mount Moriah, where Abraham offered up his son Isaac in sacrifice to God. Here, King Solomon built the first temple almost 3,000 years ago. It was destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BCE, and Jews were expelled. By 70 years later, in 516 BCE, Jews returned from the Babylonian exile with the leadership of Ezra and Nehemiah and built the second temple on the same site. 500 years later, King Herod made the second temple huge and splendid. Around 19 BC, 19, King Herod the Great, the Roman appointed Jewish king of Judea, began a massive enlargement of the Temple Mount by doubling its size, by expanding it to 3 sides to the north, west, and south, and building 15 feet thick 4 retaining walls around the Temple Mount, on top of which the second Jewish temple stood. The retaining walls were designed to hold a huge man-made platform that could accommodate 24 football fields. When it was completed, it was the world's largest functioning religious site, and until today, 2,000 years after, it remained the largest man-made platform in the world. In 70, after the Common Era, the splendid structure has taken 46 years to build, and 10,000 people was destroyed by the Romans. The only remain of the compound to survive the destruction was the one retaining wall that supported the temple platform, well known as the Western Wall behind me. The Western Wall, the total height from its foundation deep underground, is estimated at 105 feet, with the exposed section standing approximately 62 feet high. The wall consists of huge fortified stones. We know from the 1st century historian Josephus Flavius, who wrote the Jewish War and Jewish Antiquities, that the Herod temple was a gold-covered temple. The Holy of the Holies was covered in gold. The walls and columns of the other buildings were of white marble. The floor were of marbles. Its blue tint giving the impression of a moving sea of water. The curtains were from blue, white, scarlet, and purple thread, describing, according to Josephus, the whole vista of heavens. Following the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans in the year 70 to the Common Era, the area of the Temple Mount was deliberately left in ruins, first by the Romans and then by the Byzantine, the new Christian. Jewish devotion to the Western Wall has been dated from the early Byzantine period and reaffirmed the rabbinical belief that the divine presence never departed from the Western Wall. A series of rabbinical belief dating back 1,500 years and more gives the Western Wall continuous sanctity because of its proximity to the Holy of Holies, the most sacred room at the temple where God dwelled, which contained the Ark of the Covenant, the 10 Commandments, tablet inside box, chest, and the room was accessible only to the Israelite high priest once a year on Atonement Day. In 638 to the Common Era, the Muslims conquered the city, and the Caliph Omar ibn al-Khattab ordered the cleaning of the site and the building of 2 mosques on the original site of the 2 temples, Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, but he led the Jews back to Jerusalem. Historic resources show that from the moment the Muslim occupier allowed the Jews back into Jerusalem over 1,000 years ago, they would pray all along the length of the Western Wall, much of which was free of Muslim construction, unlike it was before the Six-Day War. Jews prayed the southern corner of the wall as well as its northern section near the curtain, iron, and council gate. A synagogue known as the Cave operated in an underground space beneath one gate in the western wall. The cave was located exactly opposite where the Holy of the Hollies was believed to have stood, in the middle of the Dome of the Rock where the foundation stone rests. The western wall became the central place for Jewish prayer here in Jerusalem following the earthquake that shook the city in 1546 to the Common Era. The earthquake brought down the building that had stood to flush up against the western wall in what today is the well-known prayer, the plaza. And the Turks allowed the Jews a narrow passageway for their prayer. Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent ended nearly 300 years of Mamluk rule and established the Ottoman Empire. Solomon restored Jerusalem city in 1536 and encouraged Jews who had been expelled from Spain and Portugal to settle in the city and throughout the Ottoman Empire. Throughout the century, Jews from throughout the world made the difficult pilgrimage to the land of Israel and immediately headed to the Ha-Kotel Ha-Maʿaravi, the Western Wall, to thank God. But during the more than 1,000 years Jerusalem was under Muslim rule, the Arabs often used the wall as a garbage dump, as to humiliate the Jews who visited it. For most of that period, the area in front of the wall was narrow alley, only 4 meters wide and 28 meters long, less than 6% of the wall's total length of 488 meters, boxed in by Muslim neighborhood known as the Mughrabi Quarter. The Muslims went to great length to desecrate the place by marching donkeys, horses, and camels past it and intentionally throwing out animal waste there. They broke through the wall from the Temple Mount compound and held noisy ceremony intended to keep the Jews from praying at the wall. For 19 years, from 1948 to 1967, the Kotel, the Western Wall, was under Jordanian rule, Jordanian Arab rule. Although the Jordanians had signed an armistice agreement, a ceasefire in 1949, guaranteeing Israel and the Jews the right to visit the Western Wall, not one Israeli Jew was ever permitted to do so. It was the first time in 1,000 years Jews were not allowed to visit and pray at the Western Wall. Under the Jordanian control, the Muslims erected homes and outhouses in front of the Western Wall and ran sewer pipes along it, as well as water and electricity hookups. It was frequently defaced with graffiti and public urination and used as a trash heap. Sometimes Muslims use it as a climbing wall. This is not how religion treats a place it claims today is holy to them. In 1967, despite the fact that the Jordanians controlled the disputed territory of East Jerusalem, including the Western Wall and the Temple Mount and the West Bank, Judah and Samaria, and despite the fact that Israel warned the Jordanians not to join the war, the Jordanians joined the Egyptian and the Syrian to attack and destroy the tiny Jewish state. On the third day of 1967 Six-Day War, Israeli paratroopers entered the old city and took control over the Temple Mount and the Western Wall. Several days later, the houses of the Mughrabi Quarter were bulldozed to create the large plaza that exists today in front of the Western Wall, which allowed thousands of worshippers to visit the site at one time. This was the time in which, during the conquest, freeing, liberating Jerusalem, the holy site for the Jews, the paratrooper, the strong, powerful paratrooper, cry when they touch and kiss the Western Wall for the first time in their life. Jerusalem was united again, and Jews as well as Christian and Muslim were free to worship again in the entire city of Jerusalem. We return back after 3,000 years to the united capital of the Jewish state. This is Shoula, Romano, Horing.